Hey guys, today I'm gonna show you how to assemble the Octominer B8PLUS motherboard and put it into the case that we sell. This is the 7-fan case, and this is the motherboard and all the other things we need to assemble it. So let's have a quick look. We have all the components laid down here. We got the motherboard, we got the server PSU, and here we have 8 1060s ready to get to some mining. Here we have the motherboard screws and SSD and RAM. So let's have a look of ready assembled Octominer rig first. Here we can see the ambient temperature is around 25 degrees. Here's the rig running. We got 8 1060 GTX here. Here you can see the miner running. Now this case, it doesn't have delta fans. This one will switch the fans for some lower speed and lower sound fans. With the deltas it will run cooler but much louder. We're running 8 1060s right now, so for 1060s this is fine, but for 1080s or 1070s these fans will probably be not enough for speed. But a regular version comes with the high-speed delta fans. In March we will also add the lower speed fan version. So here we can see the Hive OS dashboard. As you can see, this rig's been running for a day right now and the temperatures are stable. So let's have a look inside. And here we got it connected with a small touchscreen 7-inch display. Just running from the HDMI. Makes it very convenient to monitor the rig. So here we have 8 1060s, and this version currently we have running with ATX power supply. So we got the PCI connectors running to the cards, and because our motherboard runs on 12 volts, the ATX power supply pin needs to be jumped, otherwise it won't power on. So here you can see it's just a simple jumper pin made out of a piece of cable. If you use the server PSU we have, or any server PSU, then there's no need to jump the power pin. This is only for if you have an ATX power supply. So let's start the assembly. I like to start first with the SSD and the RAM. Always make sure to put it in the correct way. Push it in nicely till the end and then click it down. Next up we got the SSD. For that we gotta remove this small screw first. Okay, we got that loosened. Let's pop it in the slot and put the screw back. Okay, that's done. And let's just have a general look of the motherboard. Now, power comes in from these 5 ports. Usually you just need to connect the first 2. You need to connect 5 only if you run cards that don't have power connectors themselves, like 1050s or something similar. VGA port, 2 USBs, LAN port, and here we have the pins to connect to the case power button, reset button, power LED, and hard drive LED. Okay, let's continue the assembly. So we have the motherboard prepared. Let's open up the case now. Okay, here we go. So let's make some room here, move the cables out of the way. And we can put the motherboard in. Carefully slide it into place. Align the holes of the motherboard and the screws. Okay, it looks fine. Next up we take the screws. So these are the motherboard screws here. There's 2 types, only one type will fit. Okay, all screws are installed now. and ready to move on to the next stage. So let's put the power supply in and connect the power cables to the motherboard. So since we're running 1060s that have the power connectors on them, we just need to connect 2 of these 6-pin connectors and plug it in directly to the motherboard. Both nice and tight, so that's done. Now also the motherboard is shipped with this cable. This cable is only used when you need a SATA hard drive and you're running a server PSU which doesn't have the SATA power connector. So this one connects right next to the SATA connector on the motherboard. So this white 4-pin cable goes there. That's only for the SATA hard drives if you need to use it. Mostly I use SSDs or memory sticks, so not too much need for that cable. So next up, let's connect the case fans to some power. Now every case shipped with one of these kind of cables. If you're running a server PSU, it will help you make one of the 6-pin connectors into 2 Molex connectors that's needed to power the fans, because each of the sides is powered by 1 Molex connector. If you got an ATX PSU, then you don't need this cable, you don't have this issue that you need Molex connectors, but you know, if you run a server PSU, you will need to have this cable. So what we're gonna do is we can first up, let's say, connect these Molex connectors. Molex connectors always take some fiddling around, just make sure you connect it properly and none of the pins get bent while you do it. Also, when we ship out the server PSUs, we always include some of these splitter cables. This will make one 6-pin into 2 6+2 pins. Because the server PSU only has 10 6-pins, so we need to create one more to help us power the fans. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take one of these cables now here. We're gonna connect it to the adapter. Now we have extra cable. So let's hook these up. Okay, we got the fans now connected. These cables can be organized later better. Just put it out of the way a bit at the moment. Next up, let's connect the case, power, reset buttons and LEDs. So for this we have this cable in the case here. Then we get these wires. So here's the for the external 2 USB ports here. We plug this into the motherboard, and these are for the LEDs and power buttons. Okay, let's connect the USB first. This is actually more convenient to do when the case is not installed with the motherboard yet and the motherboard is out. Since I've done this plenty of times, I know exactly where to plug it in, but it's probably easier if you do it when the motherboard is outside of the case. Let me show you again where this is situated. So it's right here, you see USB 2. You need to pop that in there, and then your external USB, 2 USB ports on the front of the case will start working. So now I got that connected, and next up I need to connect this colorful cable here, and I'll show you again on this motherboard here. These wires here will go to these pins here, and there's actually a diagram of what pin does what, where's the power switch, the LEDs and so on is here. So by this guide you can see how to connect it up with the motherboard. This might also be actually easier to do when the motherboard is still outside the case. Okay, we got that hooked up. So now our motherboard is connected to power. We got the case switches and USB hooked up. So now is a good time to have a test run and power it on and see if everything is okay. So let's hook up a monitor. And let's connect the power supply to some power also. Okay. Now let's switch on the PSU. So as we can see, it's all fine. It boots up. If you want to have a look, we can see how much exactly the power consumption is when we plug it in. So we can see it's around 135 watts. That's for the motherboard and the fans. Most of it is actually the fans. The motherboard itself with the CPU takes less than 50 watts. Let's start adding some GPUs. It's best to start adding them from the back, otherwise you got the slide lock. It will be difficult to slide it and lock it if you don't start from that edge. So let's open up all the locks. Okay, let's start adding some GPUs now. Now the last switch lock for the slot is pretty tricky and it's kind of hard to reach with your fingers. So you can also use like a, let's say like a long screwdriver or something similar to lock it. Wherever you can find, but be careful when you do this, not to damage anything. So okay, we got all the GPUs in place. Let's lay the support part down here. Let's tighten it up a bit. Make sure the GPUs are nice and tight. Okay, that's nice and solid. Okay, all the GPUs are installed now. Now let's tighten the screws here, and we tighten the support bar here. For the GPUs, we'll use the screws that came with the case. We'll be using the bigger ones. That will be these ones then. These ones are for the fans in the front. When adding the screws, always be sure to be careful not to drop any loose screws in the case, because when that happens you need to remove that to be sure that there's not going to be any short circuit going to be happening because of that loose screw. Okay, let's just tighten these up one by one. Okay, all cards nice and tight. Now let's start connecting the power. Since we have 8-pin cards, we got 6-pin connectors from the PSU, we need to use adapters. Okay, we got it all hooked up now. We can organize the cables a bit, make sure nothing goes into the fans, and you know, things are a little bit cleaner here. Okay, let's power it up first and see if everything is running. Okay, everything seems to be working fine, so it's pretty much done. We can organize the cables a bit more and seal the case up. I usually use Wi-Fi for some of the rigs, so you know, Hive OS supports Wi-Fi, and usually what I do is I just have a small USB Wi-Fi adapter, either a Xiaomi or a TP-Link, popped into one of these front sockets of the motherboard. Just pop it in and that's it. Then you will have Wi-Fi. You might first need to set it up, but if you use Hive OS, these adapters are plug and play. So everything is set up now, and let's boot up the machine. Hive OS is set up and it should start mining right after the boot. So let's flick the switch on the PSU. So here we got the system up and running now. It's loud, but it's very efficient in cooling. So as you can see, all the cars are detected. And let's start the miner. You see the temperatures are very cool, but it just started, so you see the Hive dashboard. Mining Zcash right now. So let's come back in a bit and check out what's the temperature then. Okay, so we've been mining for around 1 hour now, and let's check the temperatures. You see things are still running pretty cool, from 48 to 55 degrees, and ambient temperature is 22 degrees. And power wise, we're pulling 953 watts from the wall then. And this is for 8 GTX 1060, and the voltage hasn't been optimized, it's all running on stock setting. Total consumption for those, plus the motherboard and the 7 Delta fans then. Here we can have a look on the Hive dashboard also. And we can see 1 hour and 20 minutes we've been mining.